Hey, it's the Clockwork Mage and this broadcast spell is live. Welcome back, everyone. Today, I am going to be telling a story of one of my favorite times I have made a low-level encounter. Now, in my defense, and I think I speak for a lot of other dungeon masters, I think low-level encounters are hard to make really interesting, and honestly, they can be. I think it's really hard to make encounters really impactful and memorable, especially in lower levels, since the group is still trying to get used to each other, and they're not really sure what their combat dynamic might be yet, even if they've only had a couple battles up to that point. It can be very hard to really push what would be a memorable encounter. But that's okay, and I hope all of you Dungeon Masters are able to take a little bit or idea from this encounter that I'm having, and hopefully you can make it into something bigger yourself for them to enjoy and have a lot of fun with. To give you a quick rundown of the party that I was DMing, we had a rogue, a cleric, a knight, a monk, an illusionist, and a bard, all working together. And I have to say, it was so fun. Moving forward, the party ends up walking into a town, and the town is really small. It probably only housed 20 people max, maybe 30. As they walked into town, they realized that there were some windows broken and a lot of wreckage and rubble and other stuff like that. The town wasn't completely destroyed, but it did look like it was ransacked. So the party members immediately went and started talking to the townsfolk and asked who the head of the guard was and what happened, and tried to get answers on everything that was going on. They found out the head of the guard is an old gentleman named Blackshield. Now, he's pretty old. He's late 50s, early 60s. He's way too old to be fighting, and while he can still wear his full plate armor and walk around and be imposing on a bandit or two, he definitely can't hold up against a real threat. Now, they found out that he was the only main guard and that his son would help do guard duties and other stuff like that whenever he wasn't running his shop. They had a really ragtag guard setup, if you will, for the town. And they found out that the town was recently ransacked by a group of bandits, and they were looking to get their stuff back and try to help all the merchants and people that had their stuff stolen. So the adventuring party came at the perfect time. They decided that they weren't going to fight the bandits, but they were going to try to figure out where they were and what kind of numbers they were looking at instead of just running into it head first, which was really smart by them. I was really proud of them. So they started with a scouting mission, which they found out was really good that they did that, because they were able to find a bandit that was on a small patrol, and they followed him all the way back to the camp. When they got to the camp, they noticed that the bandit group was around 15 to 20 strong. They couldn't tell the exact numbers because they were sleeping and it was nighttime, and they were just trying to figure out what was going on. Now, the whole party was there, but most of them decided to stay back to let the two rogue-like people in the group move forward, the rogue and the illusionist. So the rogue and the illusionist go forward into the camp. They sneak in and they realize the camp is just completely encased with logs, carved logs that surround the camp, protecting it. But they noticed that the logs weren't perfectly placed next to each other. So they were able to carve out a little etch in the log, in between two logs basically, and they were able to sneak through the hole. And as they snuck into the camp, they realized they found the barracks right next to them. There were some of them sleeping. Now, this is your warning. If you don't enjoy death, please just click off now. I completely understand. I just want to warn you. I'm not going to describe it in detail, but I am going to say that it does happen, and there are some graphic parts, but I will just warn you now, this story does contain that. So continuing on, the two rogue people, they ended up making a makeshift Molotov with a bottle of wine and a rag and a fire starter that they had. They threw the Molotov into the camp and basically booked it out of there. They booked it right back through the little hole that they had. They could hear the screams of the people, not getting into it, but they assumed that they might have gotten a couple of them. And with their numbers dwindled and with them having to take care of the fire in the camp, they went back and told the party of this. The party could already hear everything that was going on. And the rogue and the illusionist got reprimanded for lighting the place on fire, because what if it got the stuff that they were trying to recollect? They kind of shrugged it off and said, no, it was just the barracks, and that went back and forth for a while. But without getting too deep into that, they ended up coming up with a plan to come back in the morning while they were still tired from being woken up and having to deal with all of the stuff that was happening to the camp. So the party agreed, and they decided they were going to head back, get some rest, and then they'll be back in the morning. As they went back, they informed Black Shield of this and his son Jason. Black Shield and Jason were privy to what was going on now, so they were pretty excited to actually help and be able to help the party. Now, Jason told Black Shield that he wasn't allowed to come because he was too old and that they needed someone to stay back and protect the town just in case something happened while they were gone. So instead, Jason got one of the other town's members. Jason gave him a sword, and those two ended up joining the party for the ensuing fight that was going to happen in the morning. Everyone got ready in the morning, and they continued back out to the bandit camp. As they did, everyone was a little wary, and they were talking amongst themselves, trying to keep morale up as they pushed forward. So the bard was able to keep morale up for the rest of the party and the townsfolk that were helping, well, Jason and his friend. As they approached the camp, they didn't exactly try to let the whole camp know that they were coming up, but they couldn't really be sneaky either, especially with a knight and other people with heavier armor. It just wasn't going to work, so the whole camp was basically alerted to them as soon as all 8 of them walked up. There was nothing they could do to stop that, and honestly, they knew that going into this. Right off the bat, they were able to start fighting the 2 people at the front. The 2 people at the front, they lasted a while, and they were tough adversaries, but for all 8 of the party members, it was pretty easy to take them out. But one of them ended up calling out, "Please, Sir Tiffany, come out. Please save us." And everyone didn't understand what they were talking about. They didn't catch wind of this person that was the leader or anything like that. They knew there was a leader, but they'd never heard the name or anything like that before. So they were confused and a little wary, but they didn't see this person as more bandits started coming out of the barracks and other places like that. A few more came out of the house, and all of a sudden they were dealing with 8 bandits. So it was 1 bandit for each, but that's not how they played. A few of them were archers, a few of them were melee, and they were starting to get roughed up because of the terrain that I set forth for the party. This terrain made it hard for them to move around. As the archers were kind of hiding around corners, they would fire and they would have half cover on all of the corners of the small housing that they had in the barracks or in the barbarian camp that they commandeered. They had a fire pit in the middle that the party just couldn't walk through, so I had an archer stand behind the fire pit. It was hard to get around and the archer would be moving as well. I also had logs placed in certain places, and it was a little muddy since it had rained, so they had some rough terrain that they had to deal with as well. It was a really, really good battlefield that I put forth to them, and honestly, any DM, please use terrain tactics and battlefield tactics for your enemies. It makes the fight that much more engaging, and it makes it that much harder to deal with. You're not going to always have perfect conditions, and that's half the fun of making an encounter like this. So the fight was raging on. The party was getting some shots taken out of them, but they were dropping bandits here and there. I think at this point they had dropped 3 bandits, 2 melee, 1 ranged. They continued to fight, but at that moment, the last 2 bandits came out. So that's the moment that I had all of them do a listen check, and they could hear the full plate coming out from the back, which, by the way, none of the bandits were even close to full plate. They had breastplate at best, most of them scale mail or chain mail, just because they're bandits. They're not going to have that good of armor or anything like that. But then I had the big bandit come out with full plate armor, and his name was Tiffany. And Tiffany was intimidating. Not only that, but as Tiffany walked out, his right-hand man, an elven archer, walked out behind him. They don't know the name of him yet, so I'm not going to name him, but I will just call him an elven archer. So at this point, Tiffany walks out and yells, "What do you think you are doing here? You're all gonna die for this." It was kind of an intimidate check, so I had them roll, and I think the whole party succeeded other than the bard, which was in character. I won't get into it, but it was pretty cool. Then that's when Tiffany's turn happened. I rolled the dice, and I had the dice decide who Tiffany was going to attack first, because I didn't have a priority target for Tiffany, and Tiffany just wanted to get at the party members. So I rolled the die in front of everyone, and everyone was relieved to see that the die chose Jason Black Shield, but then they weren't as excited what ensued afterwards. Tiffany then charged at Jason with a greatsword, which, by the way, in early levels, in D&D 3.5 at least, a greatsword is 2d6. You know, you're getting 2d6 swung at you when you're like level 2 or 3. 2 swings and you're knocked out. It can be that fast at times. You don't have that much health early levels. So Tiffany then charges, and in the first swing, and I rolled it in front of everyone. I didn't hide it behind my DM shield, my trusty DM shield here. I just rolled it out in the open, and everyone was shocked to see that Tiffany had crit against Jason. That's when Jason's head rolled off, literally, as Tiffany lopped it, and he dropped like a sack of potatoes. The whole party was in shock to see this happen. It was just chaos after that. Everyone was scared for their life, and no one knew who was going to be the one to brunt Tiffany, while the rest of the party tried to drop him. Not only that, but right after that, the elven archer started firing on them. He had levels in Ranger, so they were not having fun either. He was firing arrows from almost the back of the camp and nailing them, since he had a composite longbow, allowing him to have more range. All of a sudden, the fight turned, and they were very scared. So they made up a plan that the knight, her name's Leona, they had the knight Leona take the brunt of Tiffany's attacks, since she was the most heavily armored and could actually deal some damage back. Next, they had the monk chase down the archer, since he had the best movement at the time, and he was able to get around without being encountered by anyone else. So that was kind of their pseudo plan, and the others were kind of still taking care of the stray bandits that were still there, while now dealing with the new threat that was Tiffany. And Tiffany did not go easy. The first swing, Tiffany did end up missing, and it was a battle back and forth, because while Tiffany was missing an attack here and there, so was Leona. Leona could not land a strike, and she was having just a harder time hitting Tiffany as Tiffany had hitting her. It was devastating when the first blow actually did hit Leona, though, because she took, I think, like half her health, if I'm remembering correctly. It was scary. The cleric immediately ran up and healed the best he could, but in doing so, he took an attack of op and he took damage. It was just, again, chaos, especially with the rough terrain and the fire and everything else that was going on. It was heart-wrenching at times when a dice would roll and everyone just stared at it and watched, as they were like, oh, please don't let this be the crit from the DM, or please let us crit them so we can finally move on. They were so worried, and I loved every moment of it. Everyone was having a great time. I didn't know they were having such a great time until after, but I had a feeling. Finally, after a lot of fighting, a lot of healing, and a lot of damage, Tiffany fell. It was well earned. But the fight wasn't over. They still had the elven archer in the back. As the monk got to him, he realized that he couldn't just go at him head on. He started running through the camp, but it wasn't working. He was just getting nailed every single shot. And not only that, anytime the archer had the chance, he'd move back even farther. As the monk got close, the archer just decided to take a double move instead of firing on him, and he climbed up a side ladder to get on top of the farthest back building in the camp. So now he's standing on top and firing down upon everyone, mostly the monk, since the monk's chasing after him. But he then watches as the rest of the party fell Tiffany. What I had him think was, well, I don't really have any reason to stay, and I'm not going to be able to recover any of this loot now, so I'm just going to save my own life. So what he does is the elven archer pulls out a grappling hook. He locks it in between two of the carved logs. By the way, think of like pointed logs at the top. So he locked the grappling hook between it. He then started rappelling down the back side of the logs on the back of the camp. He then rolled a check to see if he could pull the grappling hook up, but he ended up failing, so he had to leave the grappling hook there as he rappelled and then just started running into the forest that was behind him. He just sprinted as quick as he could. The monk was going to follow, but he didn't have very good climb at this moment, and he had taken so much damage that if he failed to climb, he'd be afraid that he'd get knocked out, falling out of the back, and then the elven archer would just finish him off. So he decided to just let the elven archer go, and that ended up creating a beautiful returning villain. And I had this elven archer return again and again. They figured out his name at some point, and they had to fight him over and over, and oh my goodness, every encounter was better than the last. And not to get into too many spoilers if I'm going to tell a story later on, but every single time he showed up, the whole party just groaned like, "Ugh," because he kept escaping them. They could never catch him. It was beautiful to see them frantically try to catch this elven archer. He was the slipperiest enemy I've ever created. Anyways, to continue forward after that, the rest of the bandits fell and the party was victorious. They ended up taking all of the extra loot back, but the sad part is they had to take Jason back too. So they mournfully carried Jason and his head back to the town. And when they finally got back, this ensued to be a very touching and sad moment. As they got back, they had the bard go up and talk to Blackshield Senior, I should say. As they were talking, they finally let the news go that while they were victorious, it was lost because his son had died in the battle. Blackshield Senior was very stoic. He was a very stoic man, strong-willed, and he showed that. He showed that he had been through many battles with the scars on his face, and this is the moment that broke the rest of the party though. Blackshield's stoic nature left as he began to weep and cry in front of them. The rest of the party was kind of watching, and it was very sad for them. The players themselves started crying as such a stoic and strong man broke down before them. He wept and cried and was angry, and everything, every emotion welled up in him. He was in denial. He didn't understand what was going on. He wished for his son back. He wanted nothing more than his son to be back. He wanted nothing more to have his town with his son again. It was sad, and the party decided to stay and not even take the 100 gold that they were offered in the first place to get all of the items back. They instead used their own gold to have a statue carved and placed in the center of town as a memorial to Jason, to try to make it up to Blackshield. They then had a burial, and Blackshield spoke at the burial in their small little graveyard that they had. Another speech was given, and it wasn't very long. All Blackshield said was, "And to my brave son, for I have lost you too soon. You have become a true hero, protecting the town before you. No one will ever forget you, my son." He then walked away and left the burial. He couldn't stand to see the body, and the party understood. They took what they could and buried him in the graveyard and left a headstone. They named the headstone Jason Blackshield, the hero. From then forward, they loved this town, and they did a lot for the town anytime they were around it, anytime they could. They told Blackshield where their keep was, and it was just north, so Blackshield from then on in the campaign would send them letters and ask them to come back. Blackshield was very helpful to them as well. He offered to train the knight, and other things ensued throughout the rest of this campaign, but Blackshield ended up being very vital to them and a very special place in their heart. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but there is more to Blackshield's story that I will tell at another time. I hope you guys enjoyed this story, and I hope you guys get an idea for early level encounters. Feel free to join my Discord and talk to me. The link will be down below. I hope everyone truly enjoyed this. If you didn't, please tell me. I'm trying something new, and I'd love to know if I should continue content like this. Anyways, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.